So, good evening, curious minds, and a warm welcome to all the first timers. A warm welcome to all the first timers, and a big shout out to the patrons of Curious Minds community. Just a reminder this meetup Zoom session is being recorded, and tomorrow I will upload it on the YouTube channel, the link of which will be shared. So, today we are discussing the science of generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD in short. I will use GAD or generalized anxiety disorder on and off during the presentation. So, just a minute, I cannot minimize it. Okay. So, anxiety is a normal part of life. For most people, anxiety is brief and mild. But for millions of others, anxiety is persistent, disruptive, and overwhelming. Fortunately, there are effective treatments for anxiety. We have lots to cover in this talk. This is the most requested topic for this community. In this talk, we will first learn about anxiety, its physiological response, that is to say, what happens in our body when we feel anxious. Then I will provide you with brief description about different disorders which have their roots in anxiety. Then we will understand the neurobiology of anxiety disorder, which will be followed by strategies to manage anxiety disorder, build mental resilience, and understand the science of how treatment strategies actually work. By fostering understanding and empathy, the talk aims to reduce stigma, encourage open conversation about mental health, and empower individuals with the knowledge and tools necessary to manage and overcome anxiety disorders. So let's get started. And remember, curiosity is the key to unlocking the wonders of science. So don't hesitate to ask questions or share your thoughts after the talk. Before moving into today's talk, let me introduce myself. I am a cancer immunologist, educator, and science communicator. CMC is part of Curious and Creative Lab. You can check the website. And this is my way of communicating science to masses and make learning fun for everyone. I just wanted to share this thought. Like, have you ever thought of giving someone gift of learning? If you are curious to explore that thought, contact us through website and book your first free consultation session, and we can discuss further. And this month we have a science book meetup where we are discussing how emotions are made, The Secret Life of the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barrett. Join us there if you are interested in the book. And CMC turned 2, and in this period of 2 years, we have covered 31 talks expanding from mental health, cancer, COVID, mRNA vaccines, and many others. To continue with community's growth and development, we need the support of our members. So effective from July 15, we are introducing a nominal membership fee of $10 for 4 months period. And if you are new to the group and want to explore before committing long term, I would suggest choose for a 4-month membership plan. And if you know the quality of work CMC do in every talk, choose annual plan, which is $30 per year. Now let's get to the topic on the science of anxiety disorders. So anxiety is a state experienced in response to threat that are either distal or uncertain and involves changes in an individual's subjective state, behavior, and physiology that facilitate detection of a potential threat within the environment. It is an evolutionary conserved process, and it is totally normal and adaptive. Anxiety is there to help us. It is our internal alarm system. Anxiety feels uncomfortable, it's temporary, and will eventually decrease. The body sensations we experience when we are anxious are designed to keep us safe. They are normal part of our body's natural survival response mechanism that help us arm up when faced with danger and to calm down when the threat has passed. Anxiety is different from fear, which is experienced relative to a proximal immediate threat. So, what happens? How this anxiety, which is built to help us, it's our internal alarm system, is not working for us, for most of us. We will come to that. But before that, should anxiety be avoided? Actually, not. Coping with anxiety is a critical life skill, and although it doesn't come easily for everyone, it's a skill that can be learned. So, the mantra for today is action beats anxiety. If you want to train your brain, learn this skill, you have to face anxiety head on. So it's important to resist allowing yourself to avoid situations that make you feel anxious. While you may feel better in the short term, when you stay home or opt out, in the long term, it makes things worse. That's because you never get to learn that many situations that make us anxious aren't as dangerous as we think, and we can handle them. This is how we are training our brain, that certain things which we think in our brain that it is dangerous or it can lead to certain things, we have to go and do the action, get faced with that particular thing which in your head is causing you stress and anxiety, and then your brain will learn, oh, it's not dangerous, it's not weak, I can handle it. So that's how our brain learns. It's an adaptive learning technique. So, in order to adaptively engage states of anxiety, one has to be able to predict which contexts, cues, and sensations are likely to predict an aversive outcome, which is very important. These predictions are made based on information gathered as one navigates the world. So, it's better to not to avoid anxiety. So, what happens in our body when we are anxious? Anxiety triggers our flight, fight, flight, freeze response. We will call it F3 response, which is the body's automatic built in response system designed to protect us from threat or danger. For example, when you hear the words look out, you may be surprised to find out how fast you can move to miss a baseball flying across the field. Or when you see a bear on the trail up ahead, how still and quiet you can remain until it moves on. In both scenarios, your system demonstrates its effectiveness at protecting you from danger, and that is the flight, fight, and freeze response. This was coined by Walter Cannon. He is the godfather of stress response physiology. So, what happens when we are stressed? Just understand a little bit by looking into this figure. So, this figure will tell you this is the brain, which is connected to your spinal cord, and each spinal cord is projections of nerves which are going into all the organs of your body. So, once you feel stress or you are under a stressful situation, your brain will respond to it immediately by secreting a hormone which is called adrenaline. And this is very rapid. This happens very rapidly. So, adrenaline will go down through your spinal cord and will act on different organs. So, what it does, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is your automatic nervous system, autonomic nervous system, also we call it. So, your eyes pupils will dilate, your salivary glands will stop making saliva, your heart will start beating faster, your lungs will dilate to take in more oxygen, your stomach will stop digesting anything, your liver will start producing more glucose, kidneys, intestines, bladder, everything changes. And this is happening in minutes, in seconds. So, adrenaline is released rapidly in response to a perceived threat or stressor. So, if you are paying attention to the word, I'm saying perceived. So, this is important to understand. When we face real danger, this helps us. And when we are perceiving something as a danger or a threat, then it gets worse. So, and in both of these cases, real threat or just perceiving threat, the physiology or the changes in the body are exactly the same. The body doesn't make a difference between you are just thinking or the thing is really happening. So body cannot take this, like body will not take chances. Body, the mind and the brain has to protect you, and it will activate this response system every time when you are perceiving any situation as a threat, or as a threat or an anxious response. So the effects of adrenaline are relatively short-lived, typically lasting for a few minutes to an hour. And let's just understand a little bit more what's happening here, because this is important to understand what it can do to your body. So as I mentioned, this adrenaline response will act on all the nervous system of your body, and it is it is helping you to be prepared for this F3 response. So when you have to flight from the situation, you have to run, right? So your muscles need a lot of energy and lot of glucose you need for your muscles in the leg. And so all the long-term projects will be halted, all the long-term projects, which means that digestion is a long-term project. You don't need to digest the food. You need to run from the situation. You need to fight that situation. So that long-term projects are kept on hold. Your reproductive system will be halted. There will be no production of reproductive or hormones. Your body will not be doing any repair in the body, because it is an expensive building project. Everything will be stopped. Digestion will be stopped. All the optimistic, more expensive, which body considers at the moment, will be stopped. Immunity will be inhibited. And the perception of pain is blunted. Because if you are feeling pain, you will not be able to uh, like fly from the situation, or if you are being harmed, you will not feel pain. So all this is happening in your system. The other thing which happens is you will start sweating, there will be nausea and stomach upset, you will feel dizzy and lightheaded. Then there is feeling of painful chest or tight chest, but your heart is beating faster. And there will be numbness and tingling sensation, heavy legs, and all that. So anxiety response actually overlaps with the neurocircuitry that orchestrates the stress response. So anxiety and stress, you consider them like sisters. So anxious response starts, adrenaline is in your system, autonomic nervous system or the F3 response is activated, and then HPA axis takes over. So what is this HPA axis? It is hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal gland axis. So hypothalamus is sitting in your brain. This slide shows you. And this is the region where it is secreting adrenaline. Adrenaline is acting on your nervous system, and also it is triggering your kidneys to release another stress hormone, which is cortisol. So this hormone stays in your bloodstream for longer. So adrenaline done its function and give that relay to the cortisol. Now, cortisol is doing all that stress response. And one interesting thing is cortisol is also responsible for inhibiting this stress response. So before I was mentioning you that anxiety is good for you, it is a temporary response. It activates, and as the stressor is gone, body will calm down. So always there is a positive loop and a negative loop. If a body has activated a certain system, it has a system to stop that function also. So this cortisol plays a dual role. So cortisol increase in the bloodstream will go to the brain, signal the brain that now stop producing because the stressor is not there, and the person can relax. So you are understanding this, that there is a activation and then deactivation. But when things go wrong, when you are not, when you are being exposed to these stressors on and on in your life, so understand one thing, just go back in time and think yourself as a hunter gatherer. So you are hunting, gathering, and you are in a jungle. So there will be real stressors, like there will be a lion or bear, or you have to be careful about it. And these responses will help you. If you see a lion somewhere near, you will run fast, and all these processes which are happening in your body will help you to run from that particular scenario. Now come back to your present life. You don't have a lion, you don't have a bear to run from. You have different kind of stressors. You have lot of emails to reply to. You have lot of Instagram reels or TikTok reels which you are looking at, and you're comparing your life with others' life, and that's causing you anxiety. So you are not out from the anxiety loop, and you are not doing anything for about it. When a hunter gatherer is getting anxious or stressed, that person is running from that situation. That extra glucose in the body is helping it, the person, to run. But when we are exposed to this stressor now in this modern civilization, we are not doing anything about it. We are thinking about a stressful situation, but we are not doing anything. We are just sitting. We are not utilizing that extra glucose in our body. And our body is not getting a signal of stops. The stop signal is perturbed there, is inhibited there. So, this is the dual mechanism. This is the way of life now, that our brain has not, like the brain is still not developed so much. We have developed in the technological advancement, we have made so much, but the brain has not catched up. So still our brain is a primitive brain. Still our brain is the brain of a hunter gatherer. And so we have to really build system around uh, the ways to stop this anxiety loop and stop this stress loop. And we will talk about this, how you can have these systems. So this is what I was talking about, anxiety false alarm. So the F3 system is critical to our survival from true threat or danger. But what happens when there is no real danger? Interestingly, anxiety can also trigger the system into action when we believe there is threat or danger, even if there isn't. These are examples of anxiety triggering the F3 alarm, even though these situations aren't really dangerous, and we call this a false alarm. So, which leads to a adaptive life-saving system becoming maladaptive and leading to anxiety disorders. So, anxiety, though it's normal and adaptive for some people, it can take over their lives. If you are constantly feeling anxious, worried, or on the edge, and you avoid daily activities, work, or socializing, you are avoiding socializing, it because you are too scared, anxiety has become a problem. Think of anxiety like a fog. If it covers everything, makes it hard to see, stops you from doing what you usually do, and generally gets in the way, then it becomes a problem. In small amounts, we can maneuver it through the fog and get to our destination. But when the fog is so thick, we are grounded, it's time to take action. So, anxiety disorders are actually associated with impaired workplace performance and hefty economic cost, as well as an increased risk of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. So, it is alarming, and we have to do something about it. Now, let's take a little look on the disorders which have their roots in anxiety. There are this system, this diagnostic criteria is based on Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is DSM-5. And according to DSM-5, they have categorized all these disorders. Although they have all, their roots are all based on anxiety, but they are different in their physiology. So there are specific phobias, then social anxiety disorder, then generalized anxiety disorder, which we are talking about in detail in this presentation. Then we have panic disorders, agoraphobia, separation anxiety, health anxiety, OCD. I've talked about OCD in previous talk, which can be found on YouTube, and PTSD. Also, we have discussed PTSD. and body focused repetitive behaviors and hoarding disorder. These are all real disorders, and they have clear physiological changes and brain changes in someone. So let's just get into a little bit detail what how GAD is defined by DSM-5. So as I mentioned, DSM-5 is Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. GAD describes, so GAD is largely an exclusion diagnosis. What it means is like the health the care professional will diagnose you for other disorders, and if you are not in that group, it will be considered as GAD. So it is an excessive anxiety and worry. The individual finds it difficult to control the worry, and anxiety and worry are associated with three or more of the following six symptoms. So, restlessness or feeling keyed up or on edge, being easily fatigued, difficulty concentrating or mind going blank, irritability, muscle tension, and sleep disturbance. So, how you can recognize anxiety? Okay, how you can recognize anxiety? There are physical symptoms and body reactions. As mentioned in the previous slide, the physical symptoms were mentioned there, but a little bit more if you want to know. There will be heart racing, sweating, stomach discomfort, which we discussed also. What were the F3 response? Similar things will be happening. And this is how you can know uh, that you are under anxious response. To understand more, there will be muscle pains, especially in the neck and the shoulder area. And you will get easily fatigued, difficulty paying attention. I'm repeating this thing because it's important to understand, because these are the symptoms which are commonly shown in many other disorders. So, how you know which one to focus on? So if you are feeling irritable, you are getting easily upset, snapping at people for minor reasons, and you are feeling fidgety, restless, or unable to sit still, then your anxious loop is not stopped. The anxious loop is still active in your body, which means that cortisol is still running in your body and you have excess glucose in your bloodstream. And if you know if you have excess glucose in your bloodstream, it can it can do havoc in your body, because it will then disturb the insulin sensitivity, and that can further go down into the diabetic pathway. So this is important to close that anxiety loop. The other how to recognize the other factors are anxious thoughts. You will be mostly worried about the future, what might happen, and you will mostly ask these questions: what if this happened, what if this not happen? So these are the questions which will engage your thoughts every time, and then you will start avoiding situations. What You don't want to go into that uh, anxious situations which are making you anxious, so you will start avoiding it, or you will start escaping that situations. And as we discussed before, escaping this creates its own vicious loop. If you are not uh, like facing these anxious situations, you are not learning, your brain is not learning that these situations are not that harmful. So these are the things which happens. And also anxiety, when it encourages avoidance behavior, it promotes muscle weakening and pathology of muscular and skeletal system, which then foments further atrophy. So this is like important to understand how one things can lead to another. And then you will have safety behaviors around that. So everything, if you have physical signs or body reactions which I mentioned, or if you are having anxious thoughts, what if you are avoiding situations because you don't want to be feel anxious, escape behaviors, safety behaviors. One thing here I want to like point out that avoidant behaviors, sometimes when you are introvert, you will be avoiding situations. In large group setting, you will feel tired or anxious, but that is different from anxiety disorder. So introvert person will be very happy in small group setting and will be normal itself in the group setting, which is preferential to that personality. And anxiety disorder is something different. So here, before going further into the neurocircuitry and the neuroanatomy of GAD, I want to uh, advise you that keep in mind that these descriptions are just meant to give you an idea of types of anxiety problems you might be experiencing, not to diagnose yourself. And if you believe you're experiencing intense and frequent anxiety that causes you great distress, please consult a health professional, mental health professional. So now let's go further into the neurocircuitry and neuroanatomy of anxiety disorders. So the factors which contribute to persistent anxiety in the absence of threat. So it's not like till now you must have understood, if you are avoiding anxiety, you are making yourself more prone to that anxiety disorder. And there are further things which happens in the person. So when someone pays too much attention to and focuses on negative and fearful information, it can make them think that threats are more likely to happen even when they are not. There is a saying in neurobiology that neurons which fire together wire together. That means if you are repeating a task again and again, there will be a strong circuitry around it. Your brain learns things. And we are human beings a sub are creatures of habits. So if we are repeating a certain task again and again, we are making that circuit stronger. So this is important to understand. Additionally, if they have trouble calming down their physical and mental anxiety responses and don't use strategies to, to cope with anxiety, it can make them feel like they have no control over the anxiety and that it's impossible to avoid. So the last feature or the last personality trait of a person who is more prone to anxiety disorder is being sensitive to the uncertainty of predicting threats can make them avoid situation that might be unpleasant, preventing them from learning that the world is not as scary as they initially thought. This is about learning the same thing, the neurons which wire together fire together. So now let's understand what happens in the brain when a person is feeling that anxiety disorder. So amygdala, you must have heard about this fear center. This is the fear center and emotional processing response center of our brain. So it acquires fear conditioning and it helps in expression of fear response. I will go slow here so you can understand this thing. This is very critical to understand this. So amygdala and hippocampus, how they interplay together to learn, to make you learn that this particular situation is fearful or not. So this amygdala is a structure located deep within the brain's temporal lobes, and it is crucial for processing and regulating emotions, particularly fear and anxiety. So, in fear conditioning, the amygdala plays a central role in associating a neutral stimulus with a fear inducing stimulus and subsequently triggering a fear response. So, as you are going about your day, when you perceive something, your sensory response takes in information from the environment. It is first processed by your thalamus, which is another brain center, and then it goes to the amygdala. So let's just go to this fear response, which I will tell you, which I wanted to tell you later, but let's just go here. So this is a stimuli, any stimuli, your sensory thalamus will process it, and there is two pathways to convey this message. So this is a fear response. So your brain is identifying danger. So first and foremost, it will go to that low road, and your amygdala will process that mechanism. And the hippocampus is the memory storage center of your brain. So amygdala recognize that particular stimuli as stressful, even though it is a neutral response. But because of your perceived notion, or because you think that particular situation to be fearful, your amygdala is hyperactive. In case of anxiety disorder, the amygdala is very active. So amygdala is perceiving every neutral situation as threat, as danger. And this response is stored in your hippocampal memory. So you can understand, like, if you are thinking about a stressful situation, just thinking, your amygdala is perceiving it, your hippocampus is making that diary entry. So every time, and this particular threat response will spread its wings into generalized way. So if you are feared of particular A situation, in that B situation, the hippocampus and amygdala will make a connection and will crosstalk with each other and decide that this B particular situation is similar to the A situation, and we have to activate that anxiety loop. And this is how it goes on and continues to go on. But what happens, it doesn't happen every time. Like, there is a system in our brain to check this, which is the high road, and where our prefrontal cortex comes in place. So prefrontal cortex is the one which is making logical decisions. Okay, so when we perceive something as stressful, our amygdala is something like a very active kid which wants to just perceive every situation, and will is a smoke detector. So it wants to perceive every situation and alert the brain that, oh, it can be a danger. Even it's a rope, the amygdala perceived it as a snake, it is a snake. And so our prefrontal cortex, after a few seconds, comes into action and tells the amygdala, keep quiet. This snake, this thing which you are perceiving as snake is not a snake, it's just a rope. So this is how we go about and decide that this is threat, this is not threat. But in case of GAD, or generalized anxiety disorder, the sad thing is that prefrontal cortex is not working well. The prefrontal cortex is lazy, it's not performing its functions well. So amygdala and your hippocampus is taken over. This is a very simplified view. There are many other brain organs which are taking part in this whole stress response and identification of danger. But this is the three major brain regions which are involved. So now you can understand what is happening in your brain. So let's just go back and understand it more by going into the functions of these things. So, as I mentioned, amygdala is the emotional processing and fear response center. Hippocampus is memory formation and consolidation. So, it is forming all the memory of your fear, and it is helping you to retrieve the fear memories and making connections between these two. So in case of GAD, the amygdala is very high, very active. It is hyperactive, and also the hippocampus is not working so great. So there is alterations in hippocampus volume and function. And then the prefrontal cortex, which is the fear extinction region of the brain. So the free prefrontal cortex is also not working so well. So fear extinction is a form of learning that occurs when a conditioned fear response is gradually reduced or eliminated through repeated exposure to the conditioned stimulus without the aversive event. So this will help you to understand why CBT works, or exposure therapy works for reducing or for treating anxiety. So When we are exposed to the conditioned stimulus, which we have perceived as danger, and your prefrontal cortex is sitting idle, not making sense that this is only a perceived threat response, it's not actually real danger to you. At that point, when you are repeatedly exposed to that conditioned stimulus, your prefrontal cortex will slowly understand that, okay, this is a conditioned stimulus and there is no adverse event associated with it. I should stop the amygdala from making this anxious danger response. So, this is how the therapy works or repeated exposure works. And this is why, if you are anxious about certain conditions, you have to face it to make your prefrontal cortex little bit like come back to picture, understand it. So you are making new neuronal connections and making that prefrontal cortex make the logic of the situation. So you want the logical brain into action and not just your emotional control center to take place. If I will tell you, this emotional control center is same in reptiles. So we are sharing the same brain structure as it is present in lizards. But the only difference is we have a prefrontal cortex, a very thick prefrontal cortex. And if your prefrontal cortex is not making sense, then our reptilian brain is taking over. And we need that back. We need that Homo sapien, specialized Homo sapien prefrontal cortex to take in charge of things. And so it will help you to interpret, make sense of the word, make sense of the sensory situations that you are feeling. It will help you to regulate your physiological arousal, and it will help you to make sense of things, and uncertainty and worry converge on avoidance. So this is how the three brain regions do their work. So this is the low road and the high road of identifying danger. And so, just to give you a brief idea about where these structures are situated. So, in this is your brain, and this is your hippocampus and amygdala sitting very close to each other. So, you can understand how they are working together. And this is your prefrontal cortex. All this is your prefrontal cortex. And these are the two regions or the three which are important for uh, controlling the danger response. And this is the fear circuit, which I was talking about, how our brain makes sense of things. I have talked about this. I will not go into detail. So now there are also neurotransmitters which are not working well in GAD. So what are neurotransmitters? They are chemicals which are secreted by a neuron, like it's a chemical messenger, and it's like a and messenger from one neuron to another, like how the neurons convey the information from one to another. So there comes in different uh, colors and flavors and functions, whatever you want to call them. And there are a lot of neurotransmitters, and we know functions of few of them. And so what we know that GABA is not GABA is a neurotransmitter which is a inhibitory neurotransmitter, and this is not working well. So when we have when the message is passed, you need to stop. So we have a positive and a negative feedback loop. So if we want to stop the stress response or the anxious loop, we need GABA. So GABA is reduced in GAD. Serotonin is involved in mood regulation and emotional processing, and it also helps in modulating anxiety or controlling anxiety. So, serotonin is also reduced in case of GAD. Then, norepinephrine or noradrenaline, which is activated, and it is responsible for your sympathetic nervous system. And then glutamate and dopamine. Dopamine, we all know it's a anticipatory hormone. neurotransmitter, not hormone. So if we are anticipating something and we feel good about it, the dopamine is released in our system, and dopamine is not working well in case of anxiety disorders. So this is a general overview of how the neurotransmitters are dysregulated. Now, a lot about the science of GAD. Why we need to understand science is to better understand how the treatment works and to commit to that treatment, to know that this treatment will work for us in longer down the path, and if we continue doing it. So it's better to understand and get all the knowledge of the science of these treatments. And to understand this, we need to understand the neuroanatomy and the neurocircuitry and what is changed in our body when we are anxious. So that's why it's like I spent one third of my time in discussing the science, and then we come to how we can conquer or manage anxiety, so you can make sense of whole all of the thing in a whole picture. So it is treated. Anxiety is a highly treatable disorder, but the treatment process is slow and you have to commit to it. So it will not just go away, you can manage it, because anxiety you don't want to 100% go away. It is good for us. It gives us, it is our internal alarm system, and we can't live without that F3 stress response system in our body. So we need it, but we need to control it. We need to build a mental resilience around it. So let's talk about this. So, first and foremost, we need to dial down the physical sensations of anxiety. And how we can do it, if we can activate the rest and digest nervous system. If you remember in the previous slide, when I was showing you the autonomic nervous system, there was this other section. Let me go back to the side. So, this is the sympathetic nervous system, which is your F3 response system. And there is this another nervous system, like there is always yin and yang in our body, positive, negative response. So if there is a response for anxiety, there will be an anti response, which is your rest and digest. So you need to activate that rest and digest response system whenever you want to close the anxious loop, or your body cannot automatically close it. You need to actively close it. And how you can do it? You can indulge in relaxation tools, mindfulness exercise, self soothing strategies. So these are all based on science, evidence based science. There are a lot of research on that. So diaphragmatic breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, mental vacation. And so let me go into a little bit deep into this, what I mean by that. So, when your brain thinks you are in danger, it prepares you to deal with the threat by revving up your body, even if there's no actual danger. You know, till now, what I mean by that. So, diaphragmatic breathing is actively engaging that rest and digest system. You will have to breathe slowly, hold for 2 counts, and slowly breathe out for 4 counts, hold it again, repeat the same cycle. So this presentation, I cannot go like in detail about the breathing exercises, but I will share with you. We have a workshop coming. If you're interested, you can sign up for that. And so PMR is progressive muscle relaxation, where you actively tense your muscles and then release it. And you do it for each muscle group. So if you just Google PMR guided exercises, you can find it on YouTube. There are like lot of PMR exercises which you can do. And then mental vacation is nothing like just uh, having that clarity of the thing which makes you feel relaxed. So you go back to that state mentally whenever you are feeling anxious. And there are mindfulness exercises. So what it means is you are maintenance of prolonged attention on human experiences such as thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations in the present, from moment to moment, and in an accepting, non judgmental manner. So this is a very scientific definition of mindfulness. It means that being in present, and it can be in any form. You don't have to like sit calmly and do meditation. You can do walking meditation. While you are working, you can do mindful meditation. So it's just being in the present and concentrating on the thing which you are doing. So your mind will actively like stop thinking what if questions. And then self soothing strategies are a way of engaging all your five senses. When you are doing this actively, you are building new neuronal connections in your brain. And this is how your brain works. And you are actually actively saying that this particular thing, or this particular smell, or this particular touch is making you feel good, or do something like that. So you're making these connections of like relating this in your brain and making a mental map of things. So, okay, so this is just to tell you like how the panic attack or the uh, anxious cycle activates through your breathing. So, when we are hyperventilating, when we are anxious, we are breathing very fast. And so we accumulate a lot of carbon dioxide in our body. And when it happens, it disturbs our homeostasis because our blood is at particular pH level, which our body likes to be in homeostasis every time. So homeostasis is just a normal, natural state where our body likes to be. And if it is deflected from up or down, the body wants to come back to that natural, happy state, which we call it homeostasis in science. So if your body has elevated carbon dioxide levels, your your brain will start going into that panic mode. You can just feel it. If you are underwater, you are trying to close your breathing, you will just start panicking. Or if you close your breath for few seconds, your panic mode will start. So you have to develop techniques to learn to tolerate that carbon dioxide level in your blood. And this can be easily done. It is adaptable tool, and you can learn this by learning different breathing techniques. And this is all what we will cover in the breathwork workshop. If you're interested, you can check the website. Then there are few therapies, uh, cognitive behavioral therapy. What this therapy does is it will teach your prefrontal cortex to understand the situations. It will teach your amygdala to calm down. And this will help your hippocampus to make new memories and learn new things. So this goes with cognitive restructuring, where you are replacing your anxious thoughts with more realistic and balanced ones. You are making new neuronal connections, and which are leading to changes in brain activity and reducing anxiety symptoms. But this doesn't happen like in days. It takes time, because you are making new connections to to change that old ways of learning anxious anxious cues. So you are learning new cues, and you are making the old ones go away. So, and then there is exposure therapy, and these therapies should be done with trained professional, because you can understand these anxious things are making you like sick. You don't want to deal with anxious feeling again and again. But this therapy works when you are being exposed to that anxious environment, or anxious cue, or anything which is making you anxious. And so it need to be done with a trained professional. And then there is MBCT, which is mindfulness based cognitive therapy. It's just combination of cognitive therapy combined with mindfulness practices. It is helpful in relapse prevention. So this works wonders, and there are like lot of research on MBCT, and it really changes your brain. And they have done brain scans of people undergoing this therapy. And I think 12 weeks is the period where they are saying that the brain starts seeing changes. And so now I want like these two, like Amygdala, we think of it as a emotional fear response center, but amygdala is many things. It can actually learn. So amygdala gets activated when we we are under novel situations or we consider that particular situation as harmful. So it learns from your learned behavior. It learns from your cultural or your childhood experiences. So it has a lot to do with your contextual influence. And amygdala is plastic, very plastic. So it is, you continuously learns and update its predictions based on new experiences. And through repeated exposure and associated learning, the amygdala forms new connections between previous neutral stimuli and emotional response. So that's just a slide to tell you, like, don't get feared by activated amygdala. You have all the power to control it, and it can be your friend. And then there is psychodynamic therapy. So in this, the whole focus is to, especially if you have experienced something in your childhood and your F3 response is activated, so the therapist will deal with that and will try to figure out what are the things which are um, making you anxious now. And then there's acceptance and commitment therapy. I am already run, like I'm speaking for an hour, and I don't think like you might get some questions. I will just rush through the slides. Only few slides left, but this is a very important slide, and I will cover whole presentation on it in future. But this is like, I'm talking about the psychodynamic therapy and this ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. This all has this is very new research done in last few years, which tells you that even in utero, when you are a fetus and you're in mother's womb and you are connected to the placenta, so stress response hormones can actually pass through the placenta and go into your system, and it can change your genetic map. It will not change your genes, so there are no permanent changes, but epigenetically it can change. And so epigenetic changes will make you more prone to stress later in life, and more kind of like neurotransmitter disorders and things will like that. So things can happen in utero without your knowing. So if you are feeling anxious or anxiety disorders, don't blame yourself too much. There is like hope to treat it, but there are multiple ways of you being prone to that anxiety situation. So that's the hopeful message. There's not like very hopeful, but there's light. Okay, so there are medications. We have SSRIs, benzodiazepine, then beta blockers. They all work on the neurotransmitter pathways. This is the almost last slide. All this information is for educational purpose. So please consider talk to family physician or trained mental health professional to learn more and go through a journey. So this is the YouTube page. Before I'm concluding, I would like to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this presentation with your friends and family. Your support means a lot and helps me to create more informative and valuable content. And so this is the membership plan. And if you will scan this, you will go to the PayPal and you can become a member and help the group. And this will also be shared in the meetup group. So I will end here. Thank you. And now we open for questions. You can write your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask me.